40 hours, you got to make every minute count, every move count. And if you don't look at your week like that, you'll never understand where you're losing time at. I believe a person, if they're running a business, they need to be there every morning. The rest of the day don't mean shit. Just be there in the morning, get everybody going the right direction. But raising capital, and not getting stretched out is the biggest deal. Debt, I don't care about debt. That's somebody else's problem. Capital's your problem. Everybody thinks about everything. They want to sit there and, I want to think about before we go bid this job. Piss on, think about it. Go bid the damn thing. If you get it, then we go buy this equipment, we go make that money. Then we figure it out after that. So picture you 12 months. It's a big circle. And each one of them's a room, okay? And we got to go through the room of January. And we're in that room, but we can't see the next door into February, okay? That's the reality of the construction world. We live in rooms, okay? We don't know what's in the next room, if the weather's good there, if there's work in that next room. So you got to have that team feeling, you know what I'm saying? And if you got one guy that's pulling the other way, you need to let him go. Let him go somewhere else. You got to have a team. You have to do it every day. It's running a business. I'm going to work 3 months out of the year, nothing like that. You got to go every day,
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Mobilization Mindset. My name is Scott Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today I have an awesome guest, someone that's taken it from the beginning, 25-year history, started out with a lawnmower, now has a great, thriving business, soon to be the next state senator in Arkansas, God willing. And in the meantime, he's going to talk all about leadership, growing a business, figuring it out, not making mistakes, but making them and learning from them, how you can take those investments and turn just about anything you want with the right mindset into a great, thriving business. Trey Bohannan, welcome to the show.
If you're not a leader, you'll never succeed. You might as well just walk behind somebody, because that's all you'll ever do. Leaders sleep with it, they go on vacation with it, and they never stop, and I've been that way since I was a kid,
Where'd you learn that?
I think it all boils back to insecurities in a way. When I was younger, we didn't have as much money as most people did, and stuff like that. So I always tried to surround myself with things I was in control of. Like I built my own little bicycle track in our backyard in the woods back there. And then all the neighborhood kids would come over and play on my bicycle track, and I was the boss, So then when I started mowing yards as a kid, I had several little push mowers. So I recruited all the kids in the neighborhood, we'd go mow, and then I'd divvy up the money, So, I've always just kind of set my own setting.
You had a little entrepreneurial spirit right from the get, huh?
Oh yeah. As a kid, I was rolling. Yeah. I had more fireworks than anybody in the neighborhood.
What were your parents like?
My dad worked for Sears and Roebuck, and my mom was a pretty much stay-at-home mom. And then my dad was in the National Guard, and he had a little farm. So that kind of gave me that learn to work on equipment stuff. And he had I think it was right at 100 acres, And so me and my mom, my sister, and my dad, on the weekends, we'd go down there and work on his little farm. And I enjoyed that, So that's where I learned to boost stuff off, work on stuff, as a kid.
Yeah, and you get that sense of accomplishment doing stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Like you show up, you got a bunch of stuff to do, you get it done, the family's doing it together. That's something that's just lost in today's society. It's just harder and harder to find that and recreate that in
It was a team, our family was a team, and Daddy put me on a tractor in the morning. Once we fueled it up and greased it up, and he put me on it, and they didn't have cabs on them. And at the end of the day, I was just the soot. I was just covered, and I loved it. I loved the smell of diesel and hydraulic fluid and dirt, and that's just kind of, where it came from.
All right. So tell me your favorite story about what you did when you screwed something up with that tractor the first time.
I can tell you, I know exactly where this one should go. Daddy had an 82 F-150 four-wheel drive, and I'd got out of the truck and opened the door, then jumped on my tractor, and it had duals, and I was plowing. Then I come back to get a Coke, and I took out the door because I left it. So, yeah, he was pissed.
I bet those aren't easy doors to find and fix either.
Well, I didn't know the tractor didn't have brakes. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
I
Well,
rolled up and I come in hot,
well, you said you had to learn things 3 times, but I bet you that one you only learned once.
No, I learned that one once. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
dad was, he was real, I don't know how you would say it, he was military. So, dad was a leader himself, and on the farm, you worked hard, there wasn't you didn't sleep in at our house and you didn't have a Nintendo. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Right. Remember, well, the Nintendo or the old Atari. You
Now, we
remember
did
that?
have an Atari when we were young. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Me and my brother had one of those, which we fought over until we broke the controller, and
Oh,
then we
yeah.
didn't get a new controller.
Yeah. But
That's
that's
awesome.
just how it was. Our parents didn't really believe in buying us a lot of toys. So my sister growing up, she got makeup, hair stuff, all that and clothes. And then I just pretty much got hunting stuff, from my dad and, boots, stuff like that. Well, my sister, she's owned one of the bigger hair salons in Little Rock for 30 years. And, I've been doing this for 30 years.
That's awesome.
We both worked for ourselves, our whole life.
When you got out, so like a lot of folks now in the world of business, especially in construction, and they take a similar path. They either go to school or don't, but they find themselves somehow starting their business.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, sometimes this happens in construction where they don't set out to start their business, own their own business. They're in business with someone who doesn't run a good business, and the business they either get screwed over or the business goes out of business. The next thing you know, they have this opportunity to be in business.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for those kind of folks, and what do they need to know and getting themselves into that you would like?
First thing, you don't never need a partner in nothing. You only need a partner for dancing, fucking, and picking up decoys, and that's it. You probably have to bleep that out, but
I'm
that's
gonna definitely leave that part in, my friend. There's no
that's
doubt about
the,
that.
that's the only time you
That's gonna
need.
be in the intro.
Yeah, that's the only time you need a partner for anything. You know. And I was never good at school. I wasn't good at reading and writing. And my grandpa always said, "Well, if you're good at what you do, you'll be able to afford people to do that." You know.
So the partner story that resonates. I've heard a lot of people they think they need to find a partner to be in business with and to fill some gap that they obviously think they have,
Yep.
or they just think I can't. One person can't be enough. How did you come to the conclusion of knowing that you don't need a partner in business?
My grandpa always told me that. He said, if you ever have a partner, you'll work for them. So
Do you
I just
still
never,
believe that today?
oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty much everything he ever told me was right. So, yeah, 110%, I believe that.
that's awesome. So now you obviously though you don't believe that you know everything because you already said that. So how do you fill the gaps in what you don't know?
I got
What's
a
the
good
advice you give
staff.
them?
I got a good staff and I put a lot of faith in them, and I follow up on some stuff and we're no different than anybody else. We make mistakes. Everybody here is going to make mistakes. That's part of it. I always call it the 60-40 split. 60% of the time we're going to be making money. 40% of the time we're going to be flipping dump trucks over, T-boning school buses and hitting fiber optic. That leaves a solid 20% profit. So we're good.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, as you've grown your business, what are some of the ways you've incorporated this knowledge and systems at scale so that you can, when you first started, you have 4 or 5 people, you can be the one giving the message, giving the
Yep.
guidance every single time. How do you scale that
You be here every morning, because you got 40 hours to make this all work. Okay. The whole week, you got 40 hours. We work overtime, but 40 hours, you got to make every minute count, every move count. And if you don't look at your week like that, you'll never understand where you're losing time at. So even 15 extra minutes in the shop, I don't like the truck sitting there for 15 extra minutes. I want them going, you know. And I believe a person, if they're running a business, they need to be there every morning. The
Yeah,
rest of the day don't mean shit. Just be there in the morning. Get everybody going the right direction.
that's true. You get everybody going in the right direction with the right principles and guidance and tools.
Yep.
The rest of it can figure itself out. There's
Yep.
no doubt about that.
Yeah. And when they go to lunch, there'll be four of them in a truck. One of them's going to want to go to Taco Bell. The other one's going to drive 2 miles to Wendy's. The other one wants McDonald's, and the other one's got a grandma that lives 20 miles away that's going to give him a free bologna sandwich. So that's about how a four-man crew lunch looks like.
How long do you give them for lunch in that trip? That's a
One hour, but it's generally an hour and a half. But we have these tools now like Busy and Fleet Watcher, man. Yeah, we can nip that in the bud quick.
I love the bologna sandwich is one that resonates, man. You got to be around a while to know about grandma's bologna sandwich.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people listening to this right now that have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, there's always that one dude in the truck that's broke, but he's got cigarettes. But he's like, man, just drive to my grandma's. I'll get a bologna sandwich. So that's where it comes from.
That's so good.
Yeah.
What do you think the hardest parts of growing a business for construction for you?
Uh, Building capital for one. A lot of these young guys, things are so expensive now. They're a lot more expensive from when I started. Uh, Building capital is probably, that insurance and payroll, everything's high. So there's nothing easy. So if a guy's starting off today, they're going to fight the hardest storm they'll ever fight. But raising capital, and not getting stretched out is the biggest deal. Debt, I don't care about debt. That's somebody else's problem. Capital's your problem, though. You got that. You always want to have that in the background.
Yeah. So that I like to call that principle. It was taught to me as like delayed gratification.
Yeah,
You can't be wanting all the profit in your business every single day. You got to build up the capital. And with
that's
building
it.
up the capital gives you a lot of freedom and it gives you a lot of options. It gives you all kinds of different resources. Where did you get that knowledge and discipline, and how would you pass that information on to someone starting up? But what does that look like in reality for someone? Like what
Well,
decisions do they need to make as they're kind of going through month one, year one, 2 years,
yeah.
4 years?
So my wife at the time, she was a good woman. She saved every penny. Okay. And she was very strict about money because me, I want to go buy a new truck. She's like, no, 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 no. We're going. And I just remember buy a piece of equipment, get it paid off. It just wasn't, I was not running out there like buying stuff. It just wasn't happening. She saved every penny. And that's what really got us to where we're at today. I mean, but my drive to keep everything going and loving equipment. And, we got more equipment than anybody in the South that I know of. But, we, most of all our equipment's paid off. We might owe on 10 pieces, total. So, and they're all brand new.
What's the typical thought process in your mind of how those decisions stack on top of one another? So like let's say for example your wife at the time gave you great guidance and sort of put the reins around you. But
Yep.
if you were going to go back and if you're thinking about walking back that road now and you had to do it alone and you were standing there with I want to go buy a new truck or not, like what is that decision at the moment? Like, did you just finish a job? Did you just get your taxes done? Like, if you were to pencil that out for someone that's kind of like, maybe 10, 15 years behind
Yeah.
you at the moment, and they're sitting in that moment and they got two choices and they're trying to make them, like, what does that look like?
Well, I would sit there and look at like $100,000 just sitting there not doing nothing. I'm like, okay, we can go buy this, that, like I already had it spent before I made it.
Mhm.
Then she's already figured out how to save it and where it's going to make this money, and then we're going to invest it in land and stocks and all this other stuff. We had two different approaches, and we were a good team like that. I could go out and make it, she could save it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in your world now, talking amongst your peers and folks of different stories and different journeys, different spots along the run, where do you see people make the biggest mistakes?
Uh, they overload their ass in debt. Number one, a lot of people, they have to go out and buy these big diesel trucks so they can look the part, and then they got to go buy all this high dollar skid steers and mini X's and all this. Then they don't have a shop. They're having to rent a spot to put it. Well, I built my first shop, and I still got it down there, but it was a 40 by 40, but that was the structure. That's where they clocked in. That's where we had meetings, and everything grew from that point, out. So I would say if I had to go back to where they're making their biggest mistakes is loading their ass up with debt. Then their wife has to have these new Tahoes and their hair done. Everybody wants to look successful right off the get-go before they even hit first base.
Mhm.
They need to round the mound a few times before they go buying big houses and lake houses and all that crap.
What's your opinion and thoughts behind you're either growing or dying? When
You
you
got
hear
to
that.
keep going. You can't, there's no such thing as sitting still. I've tried it. Like, hey, we're not going to get no bigger, no bigger. That don't ever. I just go with it. Don't sit. That's the problem. Everybody thinks about everything. They want to sit there and, well, I want to think about before we go bid this job. Piss on, think about it. Go bid the damn thing. If you get it, then we go buy this equipment. We go make that money. And then we figure it out after that. Everybody's worried about, they worry too much. Just go do it.
Now, when someone's thinking about, okay, bid, go do
Yeah.
it. What capacity should people do? If you were to give them some meaningful, like little guidance behind that,
Yeah.
like, like, is there any tidbits you'd give them? Like I call them swing thoughts. What are some swing thoughts in that approach that they could take with them and say, okay, I'm a $4 or $5 million company. What does it look like to take that extra step? When you're a $1 or $2 million company, what does it look like? When you're a $10 million company, what does that look like?
Well, yeah, if they're set, the deal is I don't put a lot of thought into doing something. I do not. People come in and say, "What's your margin on this job?" Fuck, I don't know what my margin is. It's profit. That's what my margin is. I'm gonna make sure we make profit at the end. I don't give a shit to go, well, we're gonna have 7% margin on this job or 10%. We're not. We're gonna make money. We're gonna go pay something off. That's just the way I look at it. Now,
Mhm.
all the people here, they know stuff like that. I don't. I honestly don't. I'm always in a hurry and I don't think things through. I just go out and do them. I'll bid a job and have equipment being delivered that day. So,
Did you put some systems around yourself or people, whether a finance person, a controller, a CFO, and knowing what you just said and how you feel about it, how did you step back? I think of that comment as very humble. For you to know that about yourself, but then
yep,
hire a CFO,
yep,
that means or listen to your wife when she's going to put the savings in place. That takes humility.
yeah, and you'll get humbled in any man like you or I. Let's say I lost everything tomorrow, okay? And I have to take a push mower and go out there and mow around all the people that I saw at the country club or the guys I hunted with, whatever. And they go, "Well, oh Trey, he's lost his ass." But that's right. But in 2 years, I'll be right back where you're at. You know what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
that's the mindset you have to have. But you're never too good to go get that. And if you are too good to go get a push mower and start, which we're older now, so we're not going to be pushing it as fast. We hope it's self-propelled. But if you're if you say I wouldn't go do that, you're not a leader. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
a leader's like a lion. You see them damn old big lions with them manes out in the deal. They fight to the death. You know what I'm saying? And they run a pride so long, but when they can't fight no more, they're gone. So once you lose the fight, you might as well just lay down because you
That's
lost the
true.
pride. You know.
That's also why you have to keep growing because you can't you won't be able to fuel yourself.
Yep.
That train keeps going and everybody on your team needs to know that whatever their dreams and goals are, that your organization is going to be big enough they can see their own inside.
Yeah,
And
these guys have been here a long time. This is their future, and I'm stepping back more and more every day, and they have more and more responsibility every day, but they've been here long enough. They know that this is the golden ticket and they can make a dang good living.
I love it. All right, Trey. So profit, margin, those are two things we do talk a lot about.
Yeah,
You've obviously figured out how to correlate making money on a job because you just can't be in business as long as you have, and you can't grow and you can't have employees and you can't own your own equipment if you don't make money. That's
yeah,
facts, right?
yeah,
All right. So now someone trying to think about that principle, how do I make sure I make money on my job? And you were going to give them, some advice. I'm going to bid these jobs and they, like you said, they think too much, they over engineer it. They
yeah,
build all these big spreadsheets, which, frankly, we do too.
yeah.
But if at the end of the day, if you're just going to be a leader and you're going to run a project, how do you make sure you make money on a job?
just manage the job from the get-go. Now I bid some jobs and I'm like, oh, cut 200,000 off of it. So make sure we get it. And then hell, come find out we was the only one to bid the damn thing, and that's the reality to it. I make mistakes here in this office that fall back on these guys. And I'm like, hey, you got to get in there and get this done because I screwed up on the bid. And that's the reality to it. Okay. Because I don't think things through like most people do. I'm not educated. So, but the margins, okay. If somebody's sitting there doing a job, let's say it's $1 million job, and you're going, all right, our margins are 7% on this job, okay, or let's say they're 20%. Does that number really mean shit compared to getting the job done? You got to get the job done to make the money. Number one, you got to sell the job. Number two, you got to get the job done in a timely manner with the weather and all that shit. And then number three, you got to fight for your money. So you got 3 times you need to hit the ball and make sure that some bitch goes out in the outfield where you can get on base.
That's right. And you know what? We map that out all the time. We see that we look at all this folks, got this great margin. They bid it perfectly. It looks awesome. And I say, all right, give me your last 5 jobs. I want to see if you executed that margin.
Yep.
And remember, I'm talking to someone who has the spreadsheet, who built it out, who has all the plan. But I say, okay, show me what was your report card? How did you do it? And a lot of times folks don't go back and do that. And that's how you lose your money. You think you have the money but what you just said is what I like to call, what's your executed margin? Because that's what really matters. And then, shit, you talk about retainage and all those other things, but when do you actually gain it? When do you actually earn it is a whole different story.
Well, okay, and I look at a year different than anybody else. So picture you 12 months. It's a big circle, and each one of them's a room, okay? And we got to go through the room of January, and we're in that room, but we can't see the next door into February, okay? That's the reality of the construction world. We live in rooms, okay? We don't know what's in the next room, if the weather's good there, if there's work in that next room.
Actually, how do you make the money? When do you actually make the money? And I said retainage. Your light bulb went off, and you're like, bam.
Yeah. So retainage is that's your profit pretty much. You know what I'm saying? That's your, hey, I'm so glad I got that $50,000 check today or that $100,000 check. It's your equity, you know what I'm saying, off that job. So we're all, if we have a 10% job or a 5% job, I'm always happy to see that shit come in. But I kind of forget about them a lot of times. The office will be like, oh, we got a check for 10,000 or a check for 3,000 or a check for 50,000. We got one the other day for 75,000, and I love seeing those checks come in, but like I said, I'm not a margin guy or none of that. I'm just I call the office there. We have 2 offices. So I call the other office every day. What's in the mail? What's in the account? What's in the bag? I do that every day. And people think that son of a bitch is crazy, but I know exactly what's there, what we're going to look like in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You see what I'm saying? I've never had to borrow a penny to make payroll. Never run a line of credit. But you get on these big jobs and you run into roadblocks like that. And so for the first time in 30 years, I went and set up a line of credit. Never done that, but I want that safety net. And I was always against it, but now, and I still am against it because it's too hard for people to pay back. But I have to have that, for suppliers.
Yeah.
And I've never ran on any type of, money like that. We just run on money we already made.
Yeah. We see, I like your analogy. You talk about those rooms. So let's stick with that thought process, for example. And we'll go back to what you and I were talking about, like, how do you make those good decisions? How do you get to a point? I think if you think about your rooms and each one, the whole calendar year, you got 12 rooms. And you mentioned round the mound, right? I think if you're starting and you can get to a point where you're rounding that mound 3 or 4 times, in this case, 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and you make good decisions when those retainage checks come in and you don't buy the truck, you pay off debt, you pay off equipment, you acquire assets that can make you money. If you can sit through that type of delayed gratification personally and let that business, which I like to think of as a baby, the business of a baby can't take care of itself. You won't let anyone in talking to your baby. You're not going to let anyone just hold your baby, and you got to feed the baby. Baby can't do anything by itself. You have to feed it, take care of it, coddle it, nurture it. And if I love your analogy of the rooms, and if you can round that mound 3 or 4 times and make 75, 80% of those decisions pretty good and not blow any money, you can lose jobs, you can make mistakes, and you can recover, and time will give you that equity, that nest egg, that cash that you mentioned in the beginning.
And it will. But like we said, we're growing the whole time. So we're running lean, 30 years ago, if you just I just said in 30 years we'll have so much money we don't have to worry about money. We run lean just like any other company. You know what I'm saying? There's never just this. We don't just go, there's $5 million sitting in this account. If it gets tough, we'll just reach out. It's not like that. We're waiting on GCs to pay us constantly and people we haul dirt for, just different stuff. So it's always a numbers game, and it always is. But I believe if you stay on top of it day by day, like I do, that's a big deal, And like I said about the rooms, you don't know. I can't look from January room into March. I just can't. I don't know what's there. So you got to wait till you open that door, and it might be snowing. It might just be a rainy month. But I know one thing: we got to make payroll, equipment payments, and all that. Now I'm very strict on fuel. We have a big fuel setup here, so we're holding 25,000 gallons at one time. We always try to keep our fuel topped off. We always our oil. We buy oil in by the pallet, and there's like 3 gallons in a box or whatever. A lot of people say, well, you should buy bulk oil. I don't like bulk oil because people put the wrong shit in the wrong jug and blow the motors up. So I just buy it in a jug that's sealed. We put it in the trucks. They take it to the job and they put it in machines, And everybody think they say, well, you could save 15%. I don't give a shit about 15%. I want the guy that don't know what the hell he's doing to put the right shit in there,
Right, because you can blow your savings quick when he blows the engine.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we rebuild our own engines here. We do a lot of 99% of our maintenance we do ourselves,
I was
So,
going to ask you how you manage maintenance because with a big fleet, that's one of the biggest
yep,
cost centers,
yep,
not only in dollars, but also in equipment being down.
yep.
Equipment's down, man, that can cost you a fortune.
But yeah, we got a lot of older equipment. We got a lot of brand new equipment, but we got a lot of older equipment because I'm bad about not selling anything, but we're good at keeping it up. That we take pride in it. Everybody that works here takes pride in it. In the wintertime, we paint equipment, we redo interiors, work on air conditioners, put new tires on. So that's just what we do. And we take pride in it. And those days that we're working in the shop, we cook in the shop, so you got to have that team feeling, you know what I'm saying? And if you got one guy that's pulling the other way, you need to let him go. Let him go somewhere else. You got to have a team.
So let's talk about that. People. When do you bring people in? When do you know to bring people in, the right people? And how do you make sure you give people a fair chance, but you also get rid of people when they're not supposed to be, when they're not belong? What's your
I,
philosophy on that?
I believe in giving everybody a chance. Okay. And that's you they can tell you stories upon stories. I believe in helping everybody, giving everybody a chance, and let them find their own position. You can't say, okay, you're going to be an accountant, or you're going to be a diesel mechanic. You don't know. Let them work here a few months. You'll find out where they're good at, and let them learn that, and that's just what we do. I've always done that. I've never had Harvard graduates work here. You know what I'm saying? That's just not how it is.
How do you know when it's time to promote someone and let them be a leader of to others?
When they're making you money, that's it.
It's good.
And the
I
person
like
that's
that.
making more money, they're going to get more bonuses than anybody. That's facts.
And lead them by example.
Yep, that's
You can't
exactly
do
it.
you can't do that being terrible.
Nope, nope, not at all.
How do you build your incentive programs around and tying the individual's incentives, compensation or work crews or schedules around what's important to you and the business at the same time?
So they don't have a percentage or any of that. It's based on performance that I see. And the people in the office, they'll tell me, hey, this one's doing good. And that's what we do. We give them raises, bonuses, stuff like that. Work trucks, but we don't award anybody anything for not doing good. We don't no participation awards here.
Yeah, it's an meritocracy.
Yeah.
That's my phrase around here too. We don't do participation
Yeah.
trophies.
No, and to run a business, you can't be just a super nice guy, but you need to be the guy that can fix problems, because this guy might have a daughter that needs to go to something, a doctor's appointment, and then this guy might have to go to court today for something. You got to have that leniency with the people,
Mhm.
and especially if it's a good employee, you say, okay, go ahead and take care of it.
So you've had some pivotal moments along your journey too. One of them, major turning points, pivotal. Like one of them was that Wendy's contract you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yep. Still
Talk
got
about that. How did that happen?
A friend of mine had all the contracts on the Wendy's, and he called me and was like, "Hey, I got two in your town. You gonna do them?" And I started with that and just kept on rolling. To it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We still have mowing crews today.
Yeah.
Still there.
Now,
Still mow the same Wendy's.
how far do you guys travel to build those out?
We used to travel about 100, miles, and now we're 60. We're 60-mile radius now.
Yeah.
You know.
What did you find was the sweet spot? Because why 60 and not 120? And I ask you that question because I want other folks to be thinking about what you might have learned across that.
So I had all like Bank of America's in this one town, Wendy's in this town, McDonald's. So I could go there and, we could hit those, and those were on year-round contracts. So in the wintertime, you're just raking in the money. And then I would try to sell other jobs around there and try to get a full day out of each town. And we did it for 20 years like that. And we just started scaling the mowing or retracting it the last few years.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, the Roy D. Smith construction acquisition, what was that all about?
We end up with a shop, 100 acres, 3 dogs and 2 cats. Yeah. It was a shit show. Man, this place was, oh God. When I say nasty, it was bad. We got a good deal on it, okay? It's a good deal. The equipment was horrible. The facility was horrible. And it took us years to clean this place up, literally. And now it looks like a golf course, but it was horrible. It looked like a junkyard. That's what it looked like.
What made you think that it was a good acquisition for you, and what were you hoping to achieve out of it?
Location. The location was perfect. The shops had the right size, but they were just junk. I mean, they were just, God, when I say it was horrible, it was horrible. You couldn't walk through them. It looked like a flea market went out of business or some shit. And I just saw it, made an offer. He accepted the offer, and we got it done. And then I went in and just started hauling shit off, cleaning it up, repainted, relighted, just new offices, I mean, everything. And so we sunk 10 times more than what we paid for it in it.
Yeah.
And
Did you know you
then,
were going to have to do that at the time?
oh man, there was open pits all around here. The front yard, hell, they were digging in the front yard, and we filled all that in. It looks like golf course. I mean, planted trees, put real nice fences up with roll gates, and it's nice now. When people drive by, they're like, my God, they've spent a lot of time, doing that. So, and we got a 100-acre facility here to, maintain.
What do you look for when you hire people, Trey? What are you looking for?
Uh, so if like I hired a guy yesterday, he'd been here 2 or 3 times and he just never could catch me. And I was like, how much do you want an hour? He goes, whatever you pay me. I just need a job. And I was like, who did you work for? What did you do? And he told me, and I was like, well, hell, why didn't you just tell me that right off the get-go? I just hired him on the spot. He's a good operator, a little overweight, but he'll be a good operator. And that's all. I don't need him to run a marathon. I need him to set his fat ass in that track hoe and dig, you know.
Is that what you told them?
No, I didn't tell him that. If he watches this, he'll be like, he talk about me.
If he's the only fat ass driving a tractor, he's gonna know he's talking about you.
He'll be all right.
That's funny. How do you, as you scaled, one of the things I found hardest to do is I was always like you. I grew up doing a lot of things. My brother and I were 14 months apart. We did many things together. My dad had us to work. I mean, the only reason I didn't shovel the driveway myself in the snowstorms in upstate New York is because my brother was only 14 months behind me.
Yeah,
Um, but I learned along the way to just be relying on myself often,
yeah,
and I just did to a fault too many things myself. And as our business grew, one of the hardest things for me to do was in any job I did, whether it was corporate America, selling, or in my business here, to be able to start to give things out and not have control that I couldn't see or understand directly,
yep.
like where I had to rely on someone. That was a really hard thing for me to do. And it definitely held us back. It definitely cost me money, pain, problems. I mean, it costs a lot. Getting on the other side of that was probably the hardest thing for me to do. And I still struggle today with it sometimes. But
Me too.
how did you learn to, how did that, I don't know.
It was real simple. We was doing a school job, and I had 5 schools to do in 30 days. They give me this big ass contract, and I had all these skid steers, and I was like, I'm the only one that can run them. Nobody else needs to run them. You'll hit the brick, blah, blah, blah. Well, I went to another job, was putting in sprinkler, and I come back, and all this dirt work's done in front of this school deal. And I'm like, who the hell did that? The boy told me, he said, well, I did it. I said, so you can run this. I thought I was the only person in the world could run a damn skid steer. I had that mindset. Well, after seen what that boy could do, he did it better than I did. Then that's when I was like, you know what? I can make more money if I don't sit here and try to sit over everybody and act like I'm the only person that can do it. And that's how we do it now. I don't hardly get on a dozer traco. Hadn't in years.
You know what's funny? Hearing you tell me that story. So my story was with a gentleman named David Schmidt,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this great, relationship here in Tampa, and I was selling medical devices at the time to this hospital. I thought I was the only one that could do it. Dude, great, right? Just like he said. And then I had to hire my replacement, and I hired this guy, David Schmidt, awesome guy, and he grew the account. And grew it, did things I couldn't even do, right? And he did some of the things I thought I was the best at in the world and never one else could ever do. He did even better and grew it even more. And so, but one of the gifts was I was so busy outside this new region that I had to get hired to that I wasn't paying attention to my local spot. And that gave him the opportunity to go in and do all these things. And what I realized is a similar scenario. All of a sudden, the front of the school was done, right? This school, it was bigger. I'm looking at these reports. And the gift was is I didn't stand there and watch him do all these things.
Yep.
Because when I did, after I knew the result, I went and watched him and saw it. And it was so different than I did that I would have never been able to watch it go down. And I wonder if the person, when he was on that skid steer doing the front of that school, if you had watched him do it, you probably would have never let him finish because
Yeah. So that's exactly right. I had to relinquish control over, I couldn't micromanage them.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to micromanage. I wanted that. I wanted somebody that could do that, but I had to have that trust in them. And I didn't have a lot of money. So if he did hit the school and I was out money, and everything else. So those early days, I worried the things I worried about then, I don't even cross my mind today.
Same.
It goes to the 60-40, 60-40 split.
They're all so much better at all the things I used to do, all of them. The individual people that do them now are all so much better at it than I am.
Yeah. And I'm not good at paperwork. I'm horrible at paperwork. Oh my goodness. My desk, I just had to move a bunch of crap on it for this while ago, but I don't do paperwork. I'm not a paperwork dude. I'll look at something and I 2 seconds later, I'm done looking at that, and look at something else. I'm the guy that only looks at the pictures in magazines. That's how I was at school. I'd show me the pictures. I can tell you the story.
Let's talk about collecting money.
Mm-hmm.
What's your philosophy on making sure you get paid?
You give them the reasonable amount of time. Let's say we turn in our stuff on the 20th. On the 15th, I expect a check. But if we don't have it by about the 25th, I start really calling, hey, where's our money? Where's our money? And that's always the same. We haven't got paid yet. We haven't got paid yet. Well, you have to stay on top of that, and that generally needs to be the owner or the second in charge or third in charge, staying on top of that. And don't let a day go by, because what I find a lot of these big companies doing now is when we should be getting our draw money, they're keeping all this money from these $50 million projects, holding them 30 days in an account of theirs, getting interest on it, then paying you see. And they contracting world's changed a lot, but I see that stopping. A lot of people called them out on it. So a lot of that's changing now.
When do you make the decision that I got to do something? I got to take it up a notch instead of just call. I got to either go there or I need to get off the job. I need to pull my guys, pull my crew.
Oh yeah. And that happens, if you can see the writing on the wall, pull your guys material, go file material lien on it, go ahead and get all that started immediately. That contractor, you say, well, this guy said he promised to give me more work. You don't never want to work for somebody that don't pay you. Okay. It's like kissing your sister. You ain't going to get nowhere if you ain't getting paid,
Right.
so.
Right. Right. It's not that. And that's the thing. I think that what you just said is that misconception that sometimes people don't correlate to is that, hey, if you're not getting paid, you don't want to work for that customer. What you
No.
thought of that customer, they're not the one. They might be that size. It might be an awesome job and they might have it, but you
Yep.
don't want to work for someone that's not going to pay you or that you have to spend an extraordinary amount of time and they're not appreciating the work.
Yep. So and it could fall either which way, but I'm a firm believer. I want to work for people that want me to make money. And I want to work for people that's spending other people's money. You work for somebody that's why we don't do any residential, because shit, an $8,000 job in their mind was an $8 million job. Well, where an $8 million job over here is like an $8,000 job. It just, you know, I don't like working for people that are spending their own money.
It's a great philosophy, man. And I think
That's the only time I ever made money was when I quit messing with residential shit.
because the emotions are removed from it. When someone's spending budget dollars, it's
That's
totally
it.
different than when they're spending their own dollars.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. That's wisdom in itself, right there. That could help someone skip around. That could get you that first 4 or 5 years around the mound real
Yeah.
quicker. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
skip a year or two if you pick just that one thing up right there.
That's exactly right.
There was another question I have for you that I was really I was just thinking about. How do you think about performance and the quality of what product and service you're going to deliver, and how do you instill that across the company?
Uh, Generally we're doing dirt. So at the end of the day, I like everything nice and clean, equipment lined up. I like cabs always cleaned out. So when people drive by, they say, oh, they keep their stuff clean. Well, that's how we keep this operation here. That's how we keep all 4 jobs that we got going right now. And I'm real big on that. I'm real big on appearance, and a lot of people say, why do you spend so much time on your facility keeping it looking like that? I said, well, if somebody brought you a $500,000 check, wouldn't you? They don't want to bring it to a broke ass some bitch's house and shop. They want to feel like they're doing business with a successful person. Successful people like to do business with other successful people.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
Dude, you're bringing out all my favorite little tidbits I'm remembering. I was selling medical devices, same hospital, and I had a manager tell me one time I had won rep of the year, and I was proud of it myself. But I was trying to play humble Scott, and I didn't want to talk about it because I felt like someone wasn't going to buy from me because I won. And he goes, dude, you haven't figured this out yet? I'm like, no, what? I go, what? His name was Chuck. I go, Chuck, what? He goes, dude, winners want to buy from winners, man.
That's it.
Like, you're going to be way better off if you let people know that they helped you win. They're going to feel great about that. They're going to want to help you win again. They don't want to know that you were not. I mean,
Yeah.
that's an asset to you. And I didn't have that mindset shift.
Yeah.
I didn't have that mindset at the time until he said that.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Yeah. So successful people want to deal with other successful people, and that's the way it is.
So speaking of mindset, what do you think is the one or two things from taking a one-man mowing shop to 25 years later, you're one of the largest in the entire Southeast. What's the mindset that someone should take from your journey that you'd want to pass on to them?
Don't be a pussy.
What is that? How does that mean in practice? I know exactly what that means for me,
You're
but
going
what does
you're
that
going to
mean in
get
practical terms?
you're going to get pushed down. People are going to talk about you throughout business. You're going to get pushed down. You're going to be told no 100 times. Don't sit back and cry. Go get you a 12-pack of beer and drink that son bitch and go on. And people can't make it in this business long, or any business, because they let their emotions get in their way and all this and all that bullshit. And I'm the same way. I don't like it when people talk about me or something like that. And I think that's why I try to keep all my stuff always on point. I get upset when trucks aren't clean, you know, because I don't want people talking behind my back. And I think that's what drives me. And don't be scared of a fight. If somebody's trying to fight you over a job, fight for it. Fight. You're going to have to fight for anything you want that's worth having in this lifetime. And you don't go into the fight knowing, hey, I might lose. No, we're going to win. We're going to win this fight. And that's
Yeah,
that's the mindset you need.
you don't have to know how you're going to win when you start.
No.
You can have a plan, but your plans get shot as soon as you get punched in the face.
Plans are for starting bonfires.
What is the one thing that I have not asked you or you haven't got a chance to say that really should be heard?
I've never sent an email in my life.
Oh, dude, I'm
I
so
I can
jealous.
barely read and write, and I can't do math hardly, you know. So, a lot of people, when I was in school, I think uh that was the beginning of 10th grade when they told me I was on a fifth grade reading level, and I was like, well, y'all failed then. If I went this far, y'all are just figuring that shit out. So, I knew I was out of there. They didn't do their job, but I wasn't a good student. I'm sitting there dreaming about shit, looking out the window, dreaming about building clubhouses and shit, and they're in here trying to teach us. I think the highest math I ever went to was just general math. I never had no algebra, none of that shit.
Yeah.
But
Well, I was just trying to teach my freshman daughter her geometry class, and dude, I couldn't do it. I didn't even know
no,
how to do it. I just
no,
looked at it. I mean, I know how to do. I might know how to do it at one point in time, but I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't even help her.
no, I don't, and I don't want to learn computer stuff. I don't, that's just, even the GPS stuff we have, they're like, hey, you need to learn this. I don't want to learn that. I don't want to fog my brain with that. I want to learn more about how to learn how to fish and hunt and do cool shit, not here. That's what I want to learn more.
I love it, man. Trey, I've loved talking to you, man. I think what you've done and how you've done it, and I think you're the perfect testament that you can do anything you want in this lifetime if you have the right mindset. You can get educated to the hills, but if
Yeah.
you don't have the gumption and the willingness to just take a step forward, figure it out along the way, have confidence in yourself that you will figure it out. You don't necessarily need to know how you're going to do it, but you need to know you will. It's a perfect example. You can live an amazing life with a great wealth.
Well, and you have to do it every day. It's running a business. Isn't, oh, I'm going to work 3 months out of the year, nothing like that. You got to go every day. And you got to have good people. If you don't have good people, yeah, I could not run this company without my top brass, hands
Yeah.
down. I couldn't do it. So, and you have to know that. You know, these guys that are like, I can run this son of a bitch without you. Yeah, that's the one that's out of business. You'll see a sale sign up in 6 months,
Yeah.
because they get greedy. You can't be greedy. I've never been greedy. I'll
No.
give my last dollar to somebody on the side of the road. That's how I've always been. And greedy people, I cannot stand them. You know, they're tight with their money. Don't be tight with money. Make enough where you can give money away.
Yeah.
That's the way I
It
look at
feels
it.
way better giving it than it does keeping it.
Yeah, I always, man, everybody, if they'll tell you, Trey give his last dollar away, because I know I can go make more. They can't. You know what I'm saying? So,
Trey, let me ask you a question, something that resonates with me. You made me think of this as you just said that. When you give, inevitably somewhere along the way, you're gonna get burned. I think I call it the devil,
oh,
comes
yeah,
and steps in.
I've been burnt hundreds of times, but I'm
Hmm.
not going to let people like that stop what I do. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If you,
Mhm.
I have helped people you have no idea, and they burn me. That's what's going to happen though. That's their deal. I did what I thought was right, but I'm not going to let that stop me from helping you or him or him or him. Not
Yeah,
let that person do that.
that's a great way to go. I hope you guys all enjoyed this as much as I have, and please follow along with Trey. Let's all root him well. Let's pray for him. Let's get him in that state Senate race. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a great week, and God bless.